Story 1. Habitual lying is not just malicious. It includes individuals who lie for no reason at all. Every time you talk to them, you find yourself trying to determine if they are being truthful or not. This is not something I can accept. Story 2. They only talked about themselves all the time and I grew tired of it. Friendship is a two-way street. Story 3. I have a great chicken salad recipe. A friend asked me for my recipe, and I shared it with her. I recommended using plain Greek yogurt, but she opted for blueberry yogurt instead. Then she got upset with me because it tasted unusual, and she felt she wasted about $30 on ingredients. She often made questionable choices, so this was the final straw. Story 4. I knew a guy from primary school until my late 20s. I found out that he was not only habitually cheating on his fiancée, but he was also abusing her. Story 5. She tried to have an inappropriate relationship with my husband and told me it was my fault because I let him go on a work trip alone and he is just such a catch. Story 6. She started having an affair with a married man whose wife was undergoing cancer treatment. My mother had cancer at the time. It was selfish and cruel. Story 7. I realized I was the only one initiating conversations and making plans, most of which were not followed through. I am autistic, and I recently learned that making plans is often not meant to be taken literally. What kind of cowardly behavior is that? Story 8. My friend would call me 3 times a day and tell me every mundane detail about her life. She would also give me unsolicited advice and treat me like a child. It became exhausting listening to her, and she would become hostile whenever I expressed an opinion different from hers. I lost my temper the last time we spoke and hung up on her. I haven't spoken to her since then. Story 9. When I told her I had cancer, she cut off contact. Years later, I am in remission and she sends me an invitation to her retirement party. I told her it was in poor taste to invite me in hopes of a gift when she didn't bother to ask about my treatment during the 4 years in between. She left an unpleasant voicemail about losing her phone and experiencing vertigo, claiming she could relate to my health issues. So I cut her off in return. Story 10. My best friend of 15 years repeatedly asked me for money because he was drowning in debt. Then, one night at a party, he became aggressive and slapped the bottom of my drink while I was taking a sip, splitting my lip. I ended our friendship and never spoke to him again. Story 11. I had a difficult experience with my sister, which ultimately led to her taking her own life. Someone I trusted stopped communicating with me, likely due to embarrassment. I didn't care about what happened between us, and her suicide was her own decision. It's disappointing not to have the strength to talk to a friend about it. I don't want to have that conversation anymore. Betrayed is the right word, but for different reasons than he might believe. Story 12. She always downplayed my achievements and accused me of showing off if I expressed happiness about something. She would also fabricate stories about me and spread them around. It was an odd friendship. Story 13. I don't want to sound harsh, but I have stopped talking to a few friends who used me as a venting surface for their problems resulting from their poor choices. I grew tired of giving advice to help them avoid making decisions that would not be good for them. Since then, I have tried to surround myself with people who are more similar to me and have a better balance of positive and negative energy to bring into my life. Story 14. I had a friend who would often undermine me in subtle ways. For example, I have a slight fear of driving, so I avoid long distances when possible. She would invite me to places and then change the location at the last minute. Story 15. My best buddy at work and usher at my wedding has been a solid friend for over a decade. He went to a yoga retreat and returned after discovering the light, becoming quite difficult to deal with. He claimed to be a fourth circle Reiki master. He even believed in crop circles, saying, "When you walk out of the corn into a crop circle, you can feel the change in atmosphere." I replied, "Well, you just walked from claustrophobic head height stalks into an open space. Of course, you felt a change." Story 16. I was always the one to start the conversation, so I waited for them to message first. That was about 3 years ago. Story 17. Continuous one-upmanship. So frequent it was like an uncontrollable verbal tic. A mutual friend would ask, How was your 2 weeks in Aruba? And before I could get a word out, he would boast, I spent 3 weeks in Negril in January. It's much nicer than Aruba. Interesting. How did you do that with only 2 weeks of vacation? I'd be asked in the lunchroom, how was your anniversary dinner at Chez Big Bucks last night? And he'd interrupt, I took my girlfriend to Villa de Price is no object last night. The food was fantastic. Yeah. So how come there are Burger Baron wrappers in your car this morning that weren't there yesterday? I'd say I was considering buying my neighbor's used BMW. He'd loudly say, I'm negotiating with the dealership for a new AMG. Even though he could not have possibly afforded one, and everyone within earshot knew it. Always something better, bigger, more desirable, more expensive. When I finally called him out after one particularly egregious boast, he completely denied ever doing such things. A person can only stand being the base for another man's self-erected statue for so long. Story 18. I have a long-term friend of over 20 years. We have been through some of the best and worst times together. However, his wife decided she no longer likes me, so he is not allowed to spend time with me. Although we are both men and there is nothing inappropriate, he has chosen not to have issues with his wife. He wants to call or text a few times a year, but I feel that we cannot hang out or truly be friends anymore. Story 19. They would not let me talk to them. They dominated every conversation to the point that I no longer wanted to be around them. Story 20. I got sick and disabled, and I think she didn't like that. I apologized for being out of touch and explained the difficult time I had been going through. I even acknowledged that I had not always been the best friend to her, but I still wanted to try. She couldn't even be bothered to respond. After I forgave her for so many things, including things she blamed me for that weren't even my fault, over the previous 10 years of our friendship. It hurt for a long time, but it's been 4 years since then, and I think now I'm glad to be rid of a friend like that. Story 21. When I realized that all my advice and personal information were used against me or for their own benefit. Story 22. I considered this person my brother. We were friends from 4th grade until our mid-20s. He has always been a little different, possibly on the spectrum, but he was my best friend. He lived across the street from my parents, so we hung out all the time. Even after I moved out, my first apartment was just down the street, and we still spent every weekend together. However, he did something sneaky and deceitful by messaging my girlfriend at the time, telling her to break up with me so he could pursue her. She showed me the texts, and at first I thought it was a joke, but he was serious based on some of the things he wrote. A few weeks later, he was arrested for an incident involving a 14-year-old. I can't come back from that. I will never speak to him again. He was 27 years old. Story 23. They borrowed money from me, claiming poverty. 2 years later, when I was in need and asked if they could repay me even a little to help with a bill, they said they were still broke. I saw on Instagram that they were traveling across Europe and having a great time. Story 24. She was consistently late to everything, canceled last minute, and forgot genuinely important events. Her partner made me uncomfortable. My final straw was her ignoring the loss I experienced last year and pretending everything was fine. Story 25. She kept calling herself hyper-empathetic and the mom friend who takes care of everyone while being rude and self-centered. I reached my breaking point much later than I should have, when she yelled at me for not going to a doctor out of concern, showing zero empathy or compassion for my illness that kept me from eating or sleeping for days. Story 26. Realizing she had no power over me anymore. Years of abuse and manipulation. After I met my wife, she made me realize I didn't owe my stepmother anything, and I decided never to speak to her again. I have kept my word ever since. Story 27. Maturity is overrated, but I am convinced some people will never grow up and still act like they did in high school. While you move on, others will be stuck in the past. Story 28. She was abusing prescription medications, along with marijuana. It's very sad. She was a fun and intelligent woman. Now, not so much. Story 29. When they sent a late-night message saying they couldn't continue, ignored my responses, and then got upset when I checked in with a family member who said they were fine and had no idea what I was talking about. It was frustrating. Please do not manipulate me. and I kindly ask you to leave me alone. Story 30. They started defending people who had treated me poorly in the past. Oh well, they changed. Oh, they did? Great, I guess that just makes everything fine now, right? Then they told me to get over it because we're all adults. I am over it, but I'm also not going to pretend it didn't happen just because she found faith. Story 31. My best friend didn't speak to me for months, ignored my presence, and pretended I wasn't there in front of anyone around us, even our group of friends who didn't know what was going on. She was so subtle about it that it took me a while to notice and even longer to understand that I hadn't done anything wrong. On New Year's Eve, she pretended as if she'd forgotten that she was supposed to pick me up since we were carpooling and she was the driver. She refused to admit she was supposed to pick me up, so another friend had to come and do it instead. I arrived hours late and wanted to confront her about it. One day in January, I asked the friend who had come to pick me up that night, who was now closer to her than I had ever been, supposedly because they had boyfriends and I didn't. Apparently being her boyfriend's desk mate in class meant I was suddenly a threat. She was out of her mind. Not once did she ever admit she had a problem with me sitting beside her new boyfriend, whom I'd known since we were children. I never saw him as attractive beyond potentially being my friend, and it was me who had introduced them. She made him stop talking to me entirely. We were still desk mates, and he avoided me completely. After months of this behavior and with people around us finally starting to notice, I was just about ready to throw in the towel and pretend that I too didn't know who she was. But we were graduating by then, and I wouldn't see much of her or her boyfriend since we were all going to university in different cities. She managed to make a classmate I was close to act as a mediator between us and manipulated me into going back to how things were, and both agreeing to treat each other better. Years later, she did the same thing again, and I said no, I've had enough. Story 32. They became supporters of the Make America Great Again movement and adopted a strict Christian stance. I stopped talking to them after they mentioned they would abandon their children if those children did not follow the same religion. Story 33. A friend of mine cheated on his girlfriend with a 16-year-old at an electronic dance music concert. I never spoke to him again. Story 34. My best friend decided that he wanted to be with my wife while I was at work. I came home from work early and found her with him. Needless to say, I don't talk to either of them anymore. Story 35. We were best friends in college for a while. I stopped talking to her because she was incapable of thinking about anything other than herself. She went through several boyfriends and would disappear when she was in a relationship, then resurface when she was on bad terms with her boyfriend to complain about them. After this happened a few times, I no longer saw her as my friend. One day, I went to take an important exam that took hours to complete, and I had to commute to the test center far from home. I finished the exam and walked out feeling anxious. When I turned on my phone, I was flooded with her messages complaining about yet another guy she was seeing. That was the last straw. Story 36. I got upset because I had a birthday party and invited friends. After my lumpectomy, I started telling everyone that I didn't have nipples, which wasn't true. I flew to South Carolina to cheat on my boyfriend, but the guy I was trying to cheat with didn't even pick me up from the airport. It was all the same person. Story 37. Severe jealousy and competition over everything. I believe relationships should be enjoyable and supportive. There is no need to have people around if we aren't experiencing that. Story 38. He was a miserable little man who had to criticize everything and everyone, especially when they were happy or excited about something. He thought he couldn't get a girlfriend because he wasn't conventionally attractive, but really it was because he was just a huge jerk. I was tired of the negativity, so one day I left the group chat and removed him from everything. Story 39. I no longer saw a benefit or purpose in talking to them. I tend to keep my relationships more transactional, and if I don't see any reason to establish or maintain that relationship, then I lose interest. Story 40. Always tried to outdo me. I am trying to be open with you as a friend, so why are you making this a competition? Story 41. He started developing feelings even though we agreed to keep it casual. When I wasn't in the mood, he still pushed for it. After it was over, I left, and once I calmed down, I realized I didn't want to be near him. I could smell his scent in my apartment and on me even after being apart for days. Once I had checked out of the relationship, the smell was no longer sweet. It was nauseating. Story 42. I had a friend who could never control her emotions. While I understand having a bad day, she often had emotional outbursts, crying and screaming at whoever set her off. I was able to calm her down, and she frequently said I was the only one who could do so. It became tiring, and she also tried to sabotage my relationships. Eventually, I decided to block her on all platforms and haven't spoken to her since. Story 43. We got into a legitimate fight. It was mild, but it made me realize we weren't actually friends anymore, and I was only holding on to our memories. It was disappointing. I don't consider myself a smoker, but he and I would have black and milds at the end of his driveway when we were late teens and early 20s. We pretty much hung out together whenever we had the chance. Then I went away to college later in life and he joined the workforce. We both seemed to change in different directions without noticing it for a while until it escalated. Oh well, it's a shame. Story 44. I became pregnant before a girl's trip, which my boyfriend and I hadn't planned. One girlfriend told me I was ruining the trip and suggested I should just abort so I wouldn't ruin the vibe. I didn't go on the trip and stopped talking to her afterward. I ended up losing the pregnancy, and when I ran into her and some mutual friends, she rubbed my tummy, saying I was still showing. My boyfriend confronted her and blocked her on all platforms after that. Story 45. She treated my wife poorly and ignored her children in favor of showing kindness to her friend's child. Just thinking about her makes me angry. Story 46. When I told her I wanted to start a family with my fiancé in the future, she seemed almost disgusted. I don't need that negativity in my life anymore. Story 47. Victim mentality and constant negativity. It felt like every day they would wake up and think, how can I be a victim today? There was always something to moan and complain about, which was draining. Story 48. Turning every topic sooner or later into a government conspiracy, politics, or the elite is again taking advantage of regular people. And I have run out of topics. Story 49. I usually don't cut people off because I didn't have a loving, supportive family, so I know the pain of not being heard. However, I spent 2.5 years trying to engage with people who identify as supporters of the former president and show them how they were being misled, but they just don't care. So, I cut off all my neighbors who support him and won't respond to them online. My family helped my ex-spouse kidnap our children to take them out of state and leave me homeless. I didn't make the choice to estrange myself. They abandoned me. I still face parental alienation, and it wouldn't matter to me what any of my siblings say about reconciliation since our parents have passed away. I won't do it. No way. I also don't gossip, and I'm tired of gossipers, so I cut them off too. Story 50. I used to have a friend who would talk about herself constantly whenever we spoke. She never asked how I was doing or what I had been up to. It became exhausting, so I stopped asking how she was and completely stopped talking to her because I couldn't deal with her rants about her life and feelings anymore. Friendship is a two-way street. Story 51. My feminist male friend called me out for being a victim blamer when I tried to explain to him that just because women can wear and do what they want doesn't mean they always felt they could or shouldn't be smart about when or where to practice those freedoms in view of the world we live in. It was an argument motivated by self-preservation and risk reduction. To be clear, my argument was in defense of why I don't do certain things out of fear. He couldn't understand the difference between a personal choice to compromise certain freedoms to mitigate risk and the fears that women live with and someone saying that if women are fearless, they deserve violence. Story 52. He is a great person, but he was part of a chapter in my life that I am trying to move forward from. Story 53. I have stopped talking to over 99% of the people I have met. You are approaching this from the wrong direction. You should be asking, what keeps you engaged with a person after the initial meeting? Not talking to someone is the default, my friend. Story 54. Shady, jealous vibes made it heartbreaking because we were so close and had so much fun together. However, after a while, I couldn't trust her due to all the little things she would do. Story 55. They believe their boyfriend's misguided ideas about the earth being flat and that homosexuality poses a threat to children. Story 56. I had to walk away from a relationship because they were unable to support me emotionally when I really needed them. Some individuals just aren't capable of showing compassion when times are tough, and it is disappointing. Story 57. Talking, as in the talking stage of a romantic relationship or talking to a friend or family member. If it's the first, that didn't happen to me because I never dated much. If the latter, a friend of 10 years came to our meetups half drunk. I thought we were drinking together. Why was he already wasted? Although he was somehow always on time to the minute, he started getting mean when drunk. It began with little jabs here and there and quickly escalated. I tolerated it for a while and finally snapped. Friendship over. Story 58. Toxic personalities. Boyfriend stealing. I found myself always being available with no reciprocation. I stopped reaching out to people who never responded. Case proven. Politics. Story 59. When we stopped being together due to a lack of common interests, he stopped texting or communicating altogether. Story 60. She told me to leave her parents' house while I was living there for my thesis just because they were paying more attention to me than to her. Story 61. After 3 months of going out and attending each other's events, he told me that I was too much for him, seriously depressed, and that I should be admitted to a mental hospital. He also mentioned that he didn't want that because I was his first serious girlfriend. My dog died, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, my parents were separating, and my sister had gone through something traumatic. He never actually asked me to be his girlfriend. I am in college. I am an adult. Why are we acting like we are in middle or high school? This situation is absolutely ridiculous. Story 62. Telling me one thing and doing another. The inconsistency felt dubious and like a setup since I had not met their other friends yet. Story 63. I was super excited about this first date I was going on and was talking to my friend about him and how it felt different when I spoke with this guy. She said, "I don't know. I don't like that guy crazy stuff. I wouldn't be so excited over a guy you haven't met yet. It might end up being a terrible date." Looking back, that wasn't the first time she had been dismissive towards me hanging out with other people. She also got upset if I didn't answer her texts in a timely manner or make time to see her. Even though I was working full-time and going to college full-time, it was not a healthy friendship. It's a little over 5 years later. He and I are married, by the way. The date went well. Story 64. I found out they were discussing delusional ideas on Facebook. I realized that no matter what we talked about, she was only going to see things her way and felt comfortable announcing it to everyone. I'm not going to waste my breath attempting to have nuanced, private conversations with people who smile to my face and then post one-sided nonsense in public. Story 65. Every time I invited him to hang out, he would tell me, "No, I'm playing a video game right now." Then, when I stopped inviting him, he became upset about it. Story 66. A friend likes to receive but never gives back. They are often very stingy yet skilled at implying that I should give to them. Despite being friends since childhood, they do not see me as a true friend. For example, I would share my food with them because that is what I was taught. If I was going to eat in front of someone, I felt I had to offer them something. I would split my food even when it was just a single serving. I watched them pull out a fruit roll-up, ball it up, and shove it in their mouth. There is a difference between a friend with whom you can share because you know they would share with you and a friend who only likes to receive. It is not a big deal, really, but it stings when it happens repeatedly. Has anyone else experienced this? Or am I overthinking it? Story 67. They live in a perpetual state of irony and are always joking. Translation: individuals who cannot admit they speak on matters they know nothing about, shifting the blame instead of learning to address their insecurities or dedicating some time to learning occasionally. Bonus points: most members of the group have a 100% presence rate whenever I am on the platform. Story 68. My former best friend didn't have a reciprocal friendship with me. I didn't fully realize it because she was never cruel or rude to me. Instead of ending the friendship, I slowly distanced myself because she wasn't open to my feedback. She is a good person, and I hope she is doing well. Story 69. An old acquaintance was very much focused on himself. He lived off being unpleasant to people to get a reaction and is the most pessimistic person I have ever met. He uses the excuse of a difficult childhood to mistreat others, and he groomed my friend's sister, who thankfully escaped from him. It all kept adding up, and I initially struggled to dissociate from him since he was one of my only friends growing up. However, once I realized how toxic he was, I was much better off without him. When I learned about him grooming someone, I felt relieved to no longer associate with him. Story 70. There are many insightful responses regarding selfish and narcissistic individuals. So I will introduce a different perspective. Emotionally turbulent individuals and those in despair often express intense feelings for various causes and attempt to initiate movements or lead others. True leaders communicate their messages in a balanced manner and are emotionally regulated. This raises concerns about individuals who may belong on some sort of watch list. I would prefer not to be associated with such individuals, even indirectly. Story 71. The same repetitive situation of only being contacted when it was convenient, with conversations primarily serving as a personal diary. That is frustrating. Story 72. I talked about plumbing for an hour straight during a hookup. I'm happy he has something he's passionate about, but I don't really care much about it. I also found out he cheats on every girl he dates. Story 73. My husband works in tile installation. There was a couple we were somewhat friends with, for whom he did some work. We live 4 hours away from them. A few months ago, we were in a difficult financial situation, and he had to finish a bathroom for them. He traveled down for 5 days to complete the job, and they owed him $3,700. He had offered to finish the bathroom, and they agreed. In the past, they always provided him with a check before he left the job site. This time, however, when he asked for payment, they claimed they didn't have the funds. We were essentially broke, and he went all the way there expecting to be paid, but received nothing. The wife had just returned from a vacation in the Dominican Republic and frequently took 5 to 6 trips a year. I was extremely frustrated that they couldn't even acknowledge their financial situation, yet made my husband travel to them and away from his family for free. I had previously gone on retreats with this woman and communicated with her regularly, but I decided I wanted nothing to do with her insincerity. When my husband offered to complete their extravagant bathroom, they could have said they wouldn't be able to pay him and suggested waiting. Instead, they insisted on having their fancy bathroom finished immediately. I was furious with them. I completely blocked them on all social media and their phone numbers. They can continue to live their pretentious lifestyle. I want no part of it. My husband sought payment from them, and they eventually had to pay with a credit card. I cannot tolerate insincere people who refuse to abandon their lavish lifestyle just to showcase it online. They disrespected my family, so I want nothing to do with them. Story 74. My friend became so overly religious that we couldn't have a single conversation without mentioning God. Even about mundane topics like, "What should I make for dinner?" I would get a response like, "Pray to the Lord and he will give you the answers you seek." Or if I said, "Oh no, I stubbed my toe," the reply would be, "Trust in the Lord to heal your pain." I have no problem discussing religion, but sometimes I feel it's okay to talk about everyday matters without including God. Story 75. My enemy, who later became my best friend, started talking to me 2 years after school ended. One day, he texted me asking for suggestions on how to propose to his crush. He never actually proposed to her, but we kept talking for 2 years. I thought he was different, but then he suddenly started making comments about my body and even asked for inappropriate pictures as a joke. Seriously, he would also say things like, "If I don't get any girl, I'll just marry you." Honestly, not even in my nightmares. When we met at cafes, he would always check my phone, but if I asked to see his, he would never let me. I always knew he was a playboy. I ignored him for a year, even though he kept texting me. When I finally decided to tell him that I didn't need him and to stop texting me, he started his emotional drama, saying I was his only best friend, that he cried missing me, and that he even stared at my pictures. Then he said the creepiest thing. He had made a private folder of all my pictures so he could just admire me. Creep. I foolishly gave him another chance, but then he admitted that he had other best friends when I wasn't available. I was okay with that, but he would only text me at midnight while I waited all day for a message from him. It was ruining my mental peace, so I finally blocked him and stopped caring about him. It felt like he was holding on to me as a last option in case his other flings didn't work out. What amuses him the most? The fact that I've never had a single relationship to date. Story 76. Becoming a different person in the Trump movement. I couldn't continue to be around someone who supported so many hurtful things that affected many people. Story 77. When they don't text me back for weeks, then reappear and act like everything is fine, even though they have read the messages. Story 78. I never put in the effort to talk or spend time together. I stopped asking them to hang out one day, and we haven't talked since. Story 79. She had 5 grandchildren. She left her 4th husband, a good man, to marry her 5th husband out of the country. She never called or reached out about the kids. 2 of the children had significant health concerns that she knew about through social media, but she still never checked in. After divorcing her 5th husband, she wanted to return to good graces after being out of the picture for 4 years. No, she was cut off. Story 80. They are HIV positive but have been on the correct medication for years, and it is under control. Despite this, I feel it is something they should disclose to a sexual partner. He started seeing someone and they stopped using condoms, but he never informed his boyfriend about his diagnosis. He kept blaming the stigma surrounding HIV and did not want to take responsibility. Story 81. Constant negativity, lack of empathy toward others, bullying behavior, and thinking other people are beneath you are characteristics of shallow individuals who lack depth. Story 82. An angry middle-aged man used a racial slur during our conversation. He managed to include complaints about liberals, homeless people, and a specific politician in that brief interaction. He appeared to be a sad, broken individual without friends or family who wanted to be around him, clinging to his anger as it seemed to be the only thing he had left. I ended the conversation, and he immediately returned to his phone to watch a loud news video. It seemed that was his only companion. Goodbye, I hope we never meet again. Story 83. My best friend from high school had a child with her ex while being in a relationship with someone else and presented him as her own. She didn't inform me. I discovered it by chance. I had my suspicions because her youngest daughter resembles her ex significantly. Her husband is not aware of this. This situation is incredibly distressing for me. Her current husband remains unaware that their youngest daughter is not biologically his. Story 84. In college, I went to a party with him. We were standing around when he loudly said, "I didn't expect so many people to be at this party," making it clear enough for everyone to hear. For the record, I'm Hispanic and he's white, which makes his behavior even more baffling. I instantly disassociated myself from him and stepped away just as basically every guy within a 20-foot radius confronted him and beat him up. I walked out of the party and went to my car. I was his ride, so I removed all the belongings he left in my car and went home. He must have found his stuff because he called me and left a voicemail offering an excuse for his comment. It was a poor excuse. I never talked to him again. Story 85. When I realized they spoke poorly behind my back. I dislike deceitful people. I forgive quickly, but I never forget. God bless. Story 86. Have you ever stopped to think about how someone treats their partners and realized they have been controlling and financially abusing every partner they have ever had? I did one day, and I have never spoken to that person since. Story 87. Distance and the effort required to maintain the friendship can be challenging. I experience occasional flakiness, but after 2 or 3 instances, it becomes clear that you may not want to see me. I also stopped talking to my sister. It was the best decision for both of us. Story 88. He said, "Don't get mad at me. What did I ever do to you? Oh, just kidnap me at the age of 7, take me to a foreign country, try to make me so much like yourself that my mom would look at me and see you for the rest of her life, abuse me physically, mentally, and emotionally, put out a cigarette on my arm, feed me jalapenos until I spit up and make me lick it off the floor, then bring me home when the Federal Bureau of Investigation got on your case. So I went through culture shock twice by the time I turned 14. No contact, Marine, aura or whatever." Story 89. I had a best friend since we were in 5th grade. We went to camps together and on independent holidays. She had this tendency that when I said something benign, she would get offended and stop talking to me. While we were on a 2-week holiday in Greece, she became upset or offended, and all of a sudden, she was not talking to me. I tried to ask, "What is wrong? What did I say? Are you okay?" Nothing. After 24 hours, she started being normal again but shut down when I asked what was wrong. When we were in our mid-20s, I went to spend New Year's Eve with my new boyfriend, who became my husband of 17 years. I called her, but she did not answer. So, I sent a long personal message, and at 4 a.m., she replied, "You too." I figured she was upset again and decided to wait until she was ready to reply. She never did. Years later, I learned through our mutual acquaintance that she was waiting for me to reach out and was very hurt that I had never apologized. For what? I never learned and never cared. Story 90. A mentorship I had been drawn into over a period of 5 years turned out to be an elaborate religious script. It seemed the entire friendship had been initiated to produce a religious conversion or transformation I didn't ask for and definitely did not want. The worst aspects were the relationship scripts they used. Elaborate and malicious doublespeak, sadistic forms of abuse disguised as spiritual care, coordinated gaslighting, and anonymous harassment, all justified by religion. It was disappointing, but causing disappointment was their primary objective. The most dangerous type of psychopathy is religious psychopathy. Story 91. I started a relationship when we were friends. They were an online friend, so we thankfully didn't see or talk to each other much. However, when they found out I was dating someone, they revealed that they were pretty sure I turned them gay and that they had a crush on me. That was fine. No one can control how they feel about someone. The turning them gay comment was a little off-putting, but whatever. After a while, whenever I brought up my partner, they would speak negatively about them, despite having no idea who they were and not knowing each other. They just talked badly about my partner because I was dating them. Then one day, out of the blue, they asked, "If you never started dating them, would I have a chance?" I answered, "In respect of my partner, I'm not answering that." And then they got mad. Eventually, I gradually stopped talking to them. They made things so weird. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.